Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's wonderful to be with you. My name is Isaac Castellaz. I'm a member of the group 360 Collective. We are education experts who specialize in helping educators to meet unprecedented challenges with unique, potent, and powerful solutions. Tonight, we have a very special program in store for you. We're going to be talking to you about our new professional development program, How to Disrupt Deficit Thinking in Schools and Classrooms. So I'm excited for all of you to be with us. I'm looking forward to telling you more about who I am, who 360 Collective is, and about this really interesting program that you've all enlisted to learn a little bit more about. Along the way, we'll pause so that you have opportunities to ask questions, to respond to what you're hearing, and so that we can have as much of an interactive dialogue as possible through a virtual space. So this is how I'm thinking that we will spend our time tonight. I will tell you a little bit about me, our group, another member of the group who will be facilitating this wonderful program along with me. We will then give you more details about the program, how we're structuring it, how we're thinking about it, and then some of the more specific granular aspects of the program that as an educator, I know that you are interested to know more about. And of course, at the end, there will be more time for a more open dialogue. But again, we will have pausing points along the way to make sure that as questions arise, you have the space and the opportunity to ask them as they come to you. So 360 Collective is comprised of three main members. We also have additional group members, but the group itself was founded by three people: Abayuni Amari Dukes, who's pictured there in the middle; Isaac Castellaz, that's me, off to the left; and then another founding member, Grant Brooks, who's pictured there to the right. Now, this picture is older. It's from 1998. It's from Western Michigan University, Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is where we all met as college students. We were all very much committed to becoming socially conscious and to raising the social conscience of the campus. We were also, in our own ways, previous to going to college, very much interested in issues of race and racial justice. And so it was on this platform, it was through this particular connection that we decided that we needed to form a newsletter called 360 Newsletter, in which we and others on campus wrote about issues of race that were both affecting and impacting students on campus, but also on a national forum as well. And so our newsletter and the work we did and the writing we did in the newsletter then grew into workshops and conversations that we facilitated for people on campus, students, professors, community members as well. We work with the NAACP and other organizations to bring conscious content to the campus and to explore issues of race in a way that we didn't see happening there on campus through the traditional means. We didn't think that the university itself was doing enough to raise racial consciousness on campus, and so we stepped in and filled that void. But we were also, at that same time, very much interested in our own studies, in our pursuit to become educators. And so that is the next part of who 360 is and how our story continues. So Abayuni Amari Dukes, pictured here, has gone on after college to work in the field of healthcare, and to, in the healthcare space, work with organizations towards well-being and to support efforts among healthcare groups to focus more on employee well-being and on client well-being as well. He's also done work in other spaces. He's worked with colleges, nonprofit organizations to create more inclusive environments, to promote and welcome diversity as well. And he's also worked with marginalized youth as well as a counselor. And he's worked with incarcerated men. He's worked with men who have been incarcerated and have left the carceral system and are working to rebuild family, to rebuild career, to rejoin their communities as well. And so this is a space that Amari has worked in since college many years ago, and he brings those experiences to the work we're now doing as 360 Collective. As for me, I went on to have a career in education, mostly in the Chicago public school system, first as a teacher and then as an administrator, including 9 years as a principal, in which I received awards and recognition for my work as a principal of National Teachers Academy. My teaching background is in the middle school and in the high school area. My assistant principal experience comes from high school, and my principal experience, as I mentioned, comes from an elementary school, National Teachers Academy, in the South Loop community, also known as the Low End community in Chicago. I'm also now a certified coach, which means that I work with professionals in all forms, education, business, and otherwise, to help people meet their developmental goals, whether they are professional, personal, or some mix thereof. And since leaving the role of principal in 2021, I've also consulted with nationally recognized groups, specifically on developing leadership frameworks to help guide the growth of those organizations or their work with education groups. I've worked with principals and networks in Houston, in Waco, Texas, and currently I'm working with principals here in Chicago as well. And so my work as an educator, my experience as an educator has informed very deeply the program that I'll be sharing with you more about in just a couple more minutes. And so moving from the newsletter space in college and now transitioning more into an education space, Amari, Grant, and I care very much about working with educators in particular, but with organizations more broadly as well, to help them to become more inclusive, to become more just, and to become a little bit more ambitious and imaginative in their pursuit of their goals. And so I mentioned earlier that as 360 Collective, working with schools, we help school leaders and educators to meet unprecedented challenges with uncommon strategy. We do think of our work as very political. We acknowledge the political realities that educators have to operate and maneuver in, whether those are teachers, whether those are school leaders, or whether those are district leaders. In each one of those roles, there are political considerations that must be taken into account, must be acknowledged. There are socioeconomic realities that must be acknowledged and must be confronted as well. So we think of our work as educators in a very political way. That is reflected in some of the things that we post on our Facebook page. If you've had a chance to check out our Facebook page, we definitely recommend that you do that. It doesn't mean that the work that we do with educators is fundamentally political, but it's something that we acknowledge, we're comfortable discussing. We specialize in conversations around issues of race and class and injustice in schools and in other forums as well. Our core values as we enter this work are humanity, unity, and possibility. Those are three things that we ground ourselves in. Anytime that we fashion a new program, anytime that we build a new partnership or form a relationship with an educator or a group of educators, these are the core values that we want to enter that relationship and enter that space with. We hope that you see those values expressed today in this conversation and in the new program that we're introducing to you today. Within our work as a consulting group, as education experts, there are particular things that we specialize in. Now, there are things listed here that we can do, that we're comfortable doing, but the things that we are most expert in doing are listed there to the right, starting with leadership development, leader preparation, and so on and so forth, all the way down to cultural competence. The ways that we like to work with educators and with schools falls into three big buckets. First of all, there are collaborative workshops. Now, those can be anything from a couple hours to a full day, where we come in, we provide training on a particular topic, something that a school has asked us to come in and work on, or maybe something that we specialize in that a group has asked us to provide more insight on. The other way that we can work with schools and with districts is through more immersive learning. And these are learning experiences that could last a semester or a marking period or a school year, where we revisit a topic over and over again. We get really deep and into the weeds, so to speak, on a particular topic that school feels is needed or valuable for them in that moment and in that context. The other thing that we can do is customized consulting, and that's where we work with school districts to design something that is completely unique. It could entail a series of workshops. It could entail visiting the school, getting into classrooms, looking at certain things as they unfold. It can include coaching work, which is something that I mentioned earlier. It can include more direct feedback, where we're appraising a particular situation and sharing insights and strategies, helping the school to problem solve. That's another area where we feel completely comfortable. The main word that I want to convey here is flexibility. Even though these are the three ways that we tend to work with schools and enjoy working with schools and with educators, we're definitely open to creating something and fashioning something that meets the needs of the school and of the partners that we're serving. But that's enough about us for now. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about you. So please tell us a little bit more in the comments about who you are and what brings you to this conversation today. I'm monitoring the chat. So if there's an insight that you'd like to share about your interest in this program, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about who you are, your role, what kind of context you're serving in, I would love to hear that, because that makes all the difference for us to get to know a little bit about you, why you're here, and what it is that you are interested to know more about relative to this program. I'll wait just a second to see if anyone adds anything to the chat. I see that there are a few people joining us, and I'd love to know who you are and where you're from. I'll move ahead and I'll check on the chat. We'll go back in just a second if I find something there in the chat. Would love again to hear more about who you are. But moving on and bringing us now to the focus of this informational session, the disrupting deficit thinking in schools and classrooms. So what's the problem that we're here to talk about? What's the thing that we as 360 Collective feel needs to be confronted most urgently? Why are we doing this in the first place? Well, the problem as we see it that is afflicting just about each and every school in which we visited, in which we worked, is something called deficit thinking. Now, what do we mean when we say deficit thinking? Richard Valencia, who's written several books on the topic of deficit thinking, specifically in schools, says that deficit thinking is a person-centered explanation of school failure among individuals as linked to group membership, typically the combination of race or ethnic minority status and or economic disadvantagement. Now, the piece that we feel most strongly about is the fact that Richard Valencia articulates that deficit thinking is a way of explaining poor school performance through the deficits of students or even of the families of students. That it isn't the school that is underperforming. The school's underperformance is the fault of or connected to or attributable to deficits that students or families or communities bring to the schools themselves. We see this over and over again. It's something that I experienced as a principal, and by experience, I mean expressed myself and also perceived in others. And this is the work that I did as a principal, in fact, and even as a teacher, those are the things that brought me to this idea of deficit thinking in the first place. And it was in my own practice, both as a teacher and as a leader, where I began to recognize deficits and deficit thinking in myself and the way that others around me thought. As I studied more, I found that there was research connected to this idea of deficit thinking, and Richard Valencia is among the leaders in articulating and expressing how deficit thinking looks and feels in schools. And in so doing, he describes deficit thinking as being expressed in several important ways. First, in victim blaming. One of the things that you may hear in schools is something like, well, if students made better choices, they could succeed and thrive. That, in other words, a student simply needs to make a better choice and then they can thrive, right? So it's the students' fault themselves that they are not succeeding in the way that we as educators desire for them to succeed. Another is oppression. Students need to understand how the real world operates. I teach it, it's their responsibility to learn it. This is the idea that I, as a teacher, am there simply to convey the information, and it's the student's job to learn it. And if students don't do their job, then that doesn't necessarily mean that I, as the teacher, haven't done my job. My job is to teach, their job is to learn. When we both do our job, we both succeed. That's an oppressive way of thinking that Richard Valencia articulates in what he describes as deficit thinking. Another one is pseudoscience. Something like saying students learn best when grouped by proficiency. So it's the idea that we should group students by ability, and that's the way that we can really reach them and get them to grow. Or we have to reach them based on their learning styles, that students have fundamental and inherent learning styles that inform their ability to succeed. There's no science to suggest that students learn only in one way or in another, or cannot learn in a multitude of ways. There's also no science that suggests that students must be grouped by ability in order to learn best. That's pseudoscience that we as educators too often succumb to. By temporal changes, what Richard Valencia is talking about are the shifting ideas and notions of the day. And if you enlist in this program, you'll understand the history of deficit thinking and how deficit thinking took shape more than a century ago. In fact, going into the middle 1800s and then progressing and developing and unfolding through the early 20th century. But most recently, one of the more recent, more modern expressions of deficit thinking is this idea of the culture of poverty. That students in poverty are trapped in this cycle, and it's this cycle that dooms them to failure, and that schools must reverse and confront this cycle of poverty. And schools can't ultimately succeed in growing children and developing children because the culture of poverty overpowers the ability of the school to succeed and thrive. And then there's this notion of educability that Valencia talks about. You may hear this in your own school when someone says, well, students who are low must be met where they are. It's the idea that a student in 8th grade that may be reading at a 5th grade level should be taught at that level in order for them to grow and progress in their own continuum of learning. Again, this is not grounded in actual data or an actual best practice. It's something that we've come to believe mistakenly. So educability and pseudoscience are very closely linked in this particular way. And then orthodoxy. Follow the rules or there will be consequences. It's this urge, whether implicit or otherwise, to protect the status quo, to do things in the way that they've always been done without questioning the reason that they are done that way in the first place. So these are the 6 expressions of what Valencia calls deficit thinking that in this program, we want to help you uncover in your own practice and in the practice of your school community, or ideally the team that you are part of. And we'll talk more about that as the program tonight goes on. But here's the other problem. It isn't just deficit thinking. It's that in the way that we as educators professionally develop ourselves as administrators or coaches or anyone responsible for facilitating adult learning in schools, the problem is that we think too often in terms of the behavior that we're trying to change, or the results that we want to get. I can't tell you how many times as a principal, the emphasis, the coaching that I received was always on my actions or on the results that I got as a principal, or even going back further in time, the results that I got as a teacher. The thing that was always missing in those supports, and that is missing in the supports that I see being provided to educators today, is a deep emphasis on mindset. It's on the approach that we bring to the work. It's the way we enter the school building each and every day. It's the values and the beliefs that we hold, sometimes on an unconscious level, that inform the way that we behave, the way that we strategize, the way that we teach, the way that we lead, and then also the results that we ultimately get. In this program, we want to try to isolate mindset as much and as strongly and as aggressively as we possibly can, because we believe very deeply that it is the mindset of the educator that ultimately informs the strategy, the actions, the behavior, and those ultimately inform the results. But as long as we focus only on the results, on the outcome of our efforts, or on the strategies themselves, without focusing on mindset first as a foundational starting point, we will never be as impactful as we want to be as educators, as teachers, as principals, as district leaders, or otherwise. So those are the two problems that we see and that we're hoping to address in the way that we have designed this particular professional development series. So I'm interested to know from you, how do you see these problems in your work as an educator? Thinking about deficit thinking, number one, as the main focus of this program, but also the way that we are trained, the way that we train others in education spaces, to focus on either the results or the behavior, but certainly not enough on the mindset. How do you see these things in your own work as an educator? I would love to hear or read rather any insights or reactions that you may have to this particular question. One of the things that strikes me, one of the ways that I first recognized deficit mindset in myself was in working at a public high school on the west side of Chicago as a history teacher. I had a really good relationship with the security guard there at the school, and we would talk all the time about the school and how we could best meet the needs of children and what that looked like in my role as a teacher and his role as a security guard. And I said to him one day that I just wanted our kids to get out of Chicago, to leave the West Side and to never come back, to go some other place, to get an education, to leave this situation and find a new life for themselves somewhere else where they could flourish, where they didn't have to worry about the dangers, as I thought of them, of living on the west side of Chicago and all of the distractions and challenges that go along with living on the west side of Chicago or growing up on the west side of Chicago. And my friend said, there's nothing wrong with my community. Why would you want children to leave the community where they've grown up, the place that they call home? I grew up here. I live here now. Don't tell children that they need to leave the community in order to find a better life for themselves. It isn't the community that's wrong. It's the way that our system works that is wrong. It isn't people in this community who have deficits. It is the system that has deficits. And that forever changed the way that I thought about my work as a teacher at that time, and also the way that I approached or would approach my work as an administrator years later. I didn't know it then, but what my friend was telling me about and what he was calling up in me was to recognize my own deficit mindset. Even though I had in my own mind good intentions and wanted to serve students well and was willing to do anything that it took in order to to do that effectively, I didn't understand that my approach was fundamentally wrong. Despite my convictions, despite my commitment, the way that I was thinking about my role and my responsibility as a teacher and the way that I was thinking about my children was fundamentally flawed. Even before I walked into school, even before I put pen to paper and planned a lesson. And therefore, nothing I could do as a result of that could be as effective as it deserved to be or as I wanted it to be because of the deficits that were pronounced in my own thinking. So that's just one story, and that's one of the early stories about me recognizing deficit thinking in my own work as an educator, and why I think and feel that uncovering deficit thinking in ourselves and in our schools is so very important today. So when we talk about deficit thinking, when we talk about the solution to deficit thinking, what is it that 360 Collective is offering as a strategy, as an answer to deficit thinking? Well, first off, let me be very clear that deficit thinking is embedded in just about every person that works in schools, that serves schools, that works directly with students. It's something that we've been taught all the way through, going back to our whatever training that we've had, whether it's at a college, whether it's in a certification program. There's fundamental deficit thinking embedded in everything that we've learned. And so unlearning it is a process. It is not a destination. It's never a place that you get to. It's something that you do continuously over and over and over again. And that is the only way to disrupt the deficit thinking in ourselves and in our practices. The way that we offer doing that is through what we're calling the assets approach. This is a collection of essential core beliefs and attitudes that center the strengths and skills of students, their families, and their communities. Alongside these core beliefs, the assets approach articulates broad strategies to replace deficit actions with empowering transformative practices, which lead to improved educator effectiveness. So what we're talking about in the assets approach is a set of core beliefs that then form and flow into strategies. I want to give you an example of some of the core beliefs that we're talking about when we describe and define the assets approach. These are the things that you'll learn more about by enrolling in this program and becoming part of the first cohort of this exciting program. So here's what we mean when we say the assets approach. Now note that we've scratched out the word deficit thinking. And in each case here, we've got assets approach core beliefs in black bold lettering. And underneath each one is a scratched out deficit statement. So for example, the first one, students I teach aren't motivated to learn. That's a deficit statement. It's blaming children for a perceived inadequacy or a weakness, or blaming students for one's own ineffectiveness as a teacher. The assets approach challenges us to truly adopt the mindset that the students I teach are naturally interested in learning. Therefore, if students become disinterested in learning, it's something that I, as the educator, haven't done properly. What I'm doing when I say that students I teach are naturally interested in learning is I'm empowering myself to become a more skillful educator, to become more interested in my students, more invested in what their interests are, what their persuasions are, what their hobbies are, things that I need to tap into as an educator in order to properly plan and instruct them as their teacher, right? So these are a few of the ideas that we will introduce through this program as it unfolds. So any reactions that you may have to the assets approach, or what the little bit that we've shared with you about what the assets approach is and its potential for you or for your team or for your school. So here it is again. I'll show you the definition of the assets approach as we have defined it, as we have established it. And then I'll show you again the examples of what we mean when we define and express the assets approach. Interested to know what you think about the assets approach and how you see the potential for the assets approach living in your own space or in your school community. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the program outcomes. These are the things that in this program we're hoping that each and every participant accomplishes. We first want participants to be able to describe the deficit mindset, including its characteristics and its origins. We've talked a little bit about those in this program, but obviously there's more for us to uncover together that you will experience as part of this program. We also want for participants to be able to identify and analyze and critique the deficit mindset in themselves and in their school community. And then the next two outcomes speak more to the assets approach, being able to describe and analyze and use the assets approach and the aligned strategies that we will share with you. And then also to begin to meaningfully ameliorate the deficit mindset by using the assets approach. As we mentioned earlier, as I said before, confronting and disrupting deficit thinking is an ongoing journey. It's not a place that you arrive. Our hope is that through this program, you begin to find some success in identifying, confronting, and then mitigating or ameliorating the deficit mindset with the assets approach. You won't finish confronting and disrupting and deconstructing the deficit mindset, but you will have effectively taken the first step. And then at the conclusion of this program and in your own work beyond this cohort, you will be charged with the heavy lifting of continuously disrupting and exploring and examining deficit thinking in your own practice or the practice of those that you are charged with supporting. So those are the outcomes. Here's some of the research that we'll be drawing upon and be sharing with you in the work that or in the experience that we want to give to you through this program. This is some of the key research, but of course there's more involved. These are the ones that we most obviously and most strongly want to share with you as part of this presentation. You can see Dismantling Contemporary Deficit Thinking. That's Richard Valencia's book, one of his books about deficit thinking. But there's another one that is from 2023 called Fix Injustice, Not Kids by Paul Gorski, whom we enjoy very much. We'll be drawing upon research of his as well in this particular cohort. Now, in terms of the scope of the program, now we're going to talk more about what it will feel like to you as a participant to be part of this program. The first thing that I want to share with you when we talk about the scope of the program is that we're going to introduce to you big ideas, but also share with you opportunities for quick wins. We feel it's incredibly important to get inside our own mindsets, to explore our deep-seated beliefs and values when it comes to education, but then get really specifically into the context of our own practice to understand how those beliefs and values express in the daily work that we're doing with students, with children, and with school communities. And that every time you're with us, you leave with something that you can try out or something you can do the next day that you are with students or with your staff or with your communities, right? So we want to get really deep and express things and consider things from an abstract point of view, but also make sure that you're able to make personal, specific connections in your daily work, right? So that's where the first two bullets come into play. When we talk about strategies and resources, there are a couple things here from previous work that we've done that are examples of the kinds of things that we want or will give to you should you sign up and enlist in this program. So the first thing there, the in the bottom left corner is called the Response to Classroom Disruption Matrix. This is something that a coach could use with a teacher when observing practice, or that a teacher could use themselves to think about the way they interact with students to help them get to a more balanced response to off-task behavior or to student disruptions. That's not something that we'll explore so much in this tool is not something that we will explore and use so much in this program, but it is an example of the kind of tools that you'd receive by enlisting and enrolling in this program. And then the other to the far right, that is a tool that we used in facilitating a book discussion using the book Leadership by John Maxwell. So this is one that directly connects to chapter 11 of that book and takes key concepts from the book and delineates very specific examples for how a school leader might express those key ideas in their daily work. So again, that's a separate relationship, a separate focus than the one that we have here in the disrupting deficit thinking in schools and classrooms. But these are examples of the kinds of tools that you'd get specific to disrupting deficit thinking should you enroll in this program. Now, on to the sequence of the program. What is the order of the program? How much time will the program involve? What kind of commitment do I need to make as a participant potentially in this program? That's what I want to share with you now. So there are three big components in the way that this program is sequenced. There's the first part, which is the biggest part. That's the learning and the studying of deficit thinking and the assets approach. That will happen in September through December. Then in the middle of this program, there'll be one particular meeting where we will meet with you and your school team one-on-one to discuss your particular progress and your particular learning at the halfway point of the program. And then the last part of the program, February through May, is where you will begin to apply in a very direct way, kind of like through action research, if you will, some of the ideas and concepts that we've been exploring and practicing over the first part of the school year together. So those are the three big components. In terms of the way this all shakes out, thinking now in terms of more like a syllabus and the dates and the times and everything, the learn and study part of the program encompasses 5 virtual learning experiences. You can see 1 in September, that's the kickoff, 2 in October, 1 in November, and then 1 in December. Most of them are a couple hours long. A couple of them, though, are just 90 minutes long. And then the midpoint where Abayuni and I will check in directly one-on-one with you, that'll be about a 60-minute meeting that happens the week of January 13th to 17th. We would schedule that time together during that week, and it would be contingent on your schedule so that the time that we get together fits with other things you have going on in your week. And we're thinking that we would be together for about 60 minutes to both talk with you about what you've taken out of the program so far and how you think you can most apply this learning moving forward into the second half of the school year. And then the learning and studying portion of this program will happen starting in February through May. We will have 3 virtual learning sessions between February and May, where we will get together, you and others who have enlisted in the program, to talk about what it is you're doing, what it is you're learning. You'll be basically reporting on what it is you've tried, what it is you've learned, any progress that you've seen. And the rest of the cohort will support you in providing insight, reacting to the progress that you've made. Your insights will inform their work, their learning, their progress will inform yours. It is a very cooperative, collaborative experience that we're hoping to have in those 3 virtual learning sessions. I want to also call out that you can notice that we spend more time together in the beginning of the program than at the end. We know from being classroom teachers, from being administrators ourselves, from working in schools ourselves, that the second half of the school year is always more demanding, more tedious, and time is always more scarce as the school year continues into its second half. And that's why the experience that we'll have together won't be so much about new learning, but simply reporting our own experiences from the field, as opposed to getting new learning and then trying to apply or practice that, as we're also navigating arguably the most complex and demanding part of the school year together. So we've designed this sequence very intentionally to fit the demands of what we know educators experience throughout the course of the school year. Now, when we get together in those virtual meeting spaces, particularly those first 5 meetings where there's going to be some learning that happens, we're very much committed to creating a collaborative space that is interactive in nature. I've been in virtual learning spaces. I've conducted learning in virtual learning. I was a principal through the COVID-19, the worst part of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know how challenging and how trying virtual learning can be, especially when it's done badly and poorly. We will not be leading virtual learning in that way, where it's a sit and get a lot of us talking at you. It will be interactive. We will use Zoom, where you can chime in, you can unmute, you can get into the chat. We will put you in small groups. We will have other tools to enhance the virtual learning experience for you and for others who are participating as well. So a sample agenda from one of those meetings might be, first, some connections, some socializing activities to kick off the first 10 minutes. Then the next part of the meeting might be for us to talk about things that we've done in the field. What sorts of learning have we done? How did we apply learning from last time in our own work, or what have we thought about since the last time we were together? Then we'll spend about 30 minutes learning new content, and then 15 more minutes discussing it in small groups, and also sharing insight and perspective as a whole group as well. And then the last 20 minutes will be time for you and ideally your partner who you're in the program with to begin thinking about the next steps. So now that you've got this new learning, how might you apply it in the next several weeks before we come back together again? And then finally, a debrief and a close. Every time that we leave one another, we want to know from you what the experience was like, what went well, what should we change, so that the next time we're together, we can provide an even livelier, more robust experience for you. So that will, and we will also, of course, summarize next steps, make sure that we all understand what we'll be doing over the next few weeks when we go back to our school communities and to our respective work streams, wherever we are, and when we will come together next. So sort of like logistics and things like that to close. So that's the way that we will structure our agendas. Now, the themes, the big content areas that we will be talking about, and this is shown on the left part of this slide, where we will be exploring deficit thinking most deeply, are in things like parent involvement and student voice, curriculum and instruction, thinking more about whole group, tier 1 instruction, differentiation, meaning the way that we work with small groups of students, and then student and staff rapport and relationships. These are the 5 areas where deficit thinking is most obviously expressed. And so these are the areas that we want to dig deep. And so when we think about those 5 themes, and we think about the learn and study portion of this program represented in the lime green there at the top, September through November, imagine that each one of those topics would fit into one of those virtual learning sessions. So September, October, November, December would focus on the themes of parent involvement, student voice, curriculum instruction, differentiation, staff and student support. So what are the next steps for you listening from your homes? The next steps are as follows. Well, first off, we want to make sure that you understand the cost involved with this program. So what we're asking and what we've set as a price is $3,000 for 1 to 2 people. Now, we really prefer that 2 people from a given school community enroll in the program together so that you have a thought partner, not only in the virtual sessions, but also when you leave the virtual session and bring the learning to your school community. It's always better to have someone in the work with you. It is not required, but we would like for teams of 2 at least to enroll in the program. Now, we can accommodate larger teams. For every additional person that would be participating, it is $750 extra. We ideally want to cap the space to somewhere between 30 and 40 participants. So space is limited. We could go more than that, but we would really like to stay in that 30 to 40. Ideally, not more than, say, 15 to 20 school communities would be a good fit for us, and what we think would provide the optimal experience for our participants, for those that join the cohort. In terms of how to continue or to enroll in the program, the way that you would do that is through a Google form that we will drop in the chat right now for you, but it will also be live on our website, 360collective.online. So if you are interested in enrolling in this program and you want to secure your space to do that, simply use the form that is now in the comment section, or go to our website, 360collective.online, and secure your spot there by registering on our website. If you would like to talk more with us about the program, you can definitely do that. Just reach out to us on our website or complete this form. There's a space where you can request to have a consultation with us, where we set up something just between us to talk more about the program. We're also happy to customize this program to meet your needs. And I'll come to that and discuss that a little bit more in just a second. We will keep registration open until August 30th, but as I mentioned earlier, the first virtual meeting is September 10th. So we want to have our cohort secured at least a week in advance of that. And we want to also make sure that billing is secured by then and payment is secured by then as well. We can accommodate purchase orders. We will have an Eventbrite portal open for payment, and there are other ways that payment can be made as well. But we are a registered LLC, so we have an EIN number that we can provide. We can work with your school district to receive a purchase order. We can be very flexible in the way that payment is made. And as I mentioned, you can find us at 360collective.online, or you can email us if you'd like to set up something directly to talk to us, or simply fill out the registration form and we can return your request that way as well. Additional support is available if you would like it. We have this quote here from Paul Gorski. The quote here indicates that there is no formula to how to get to equity, how to achieve equity, how to realize justice in our school communities. It's something that we have to constantly prioritize and emphasize in our own work. And so we realize that your journey in disrupting deficit thinking may require more or different support than what we're providing just in the virtual space. So if you would like additional coaching or consulting in addition to the virtual program, we're happy to consult with you and to discuss that more with you. We can also visit with you on site if you find that to be something helpful for you. Just reach out to us and we can talk more about what that might look like. So with that said, that concludes our program for this evening. We've spent about 50 minutes together. If there are any more questions, now's the time to ask. Drop them in the chat. I'm happy to talk with you more if you would like, or to chat with you more now if you like. So I'll just hang out here for one more second to see if anything appears in the chat before we close out. But as mentioned, our website is 360collective.online. We have a range of resources there that you can check out in addition to registering for the program that we have shared. and we are happy to talk with you further. It doesn't look like there are any other comments in the chat. So with that said, we wish you all the best. We hope that we see you again. And real power is people, as we say here at 360 Collective. We wish you all the best, and we hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody.